plateaus and footprints that we leave behind as markers of our life's journey. That only makes up about 20 to 30%. The rest is defined and connected by the in-between. Everything that takes place in between. And this is where the art of the spiritual warrior comes in. We can develop the tools and the means to identify all these different elements in our world and become the alchemists of our lives, peering through the nexus and the prism of our multiverse, and drawing forth all that we are into the present now.
Good day, everybody. We managed to get here. Okay. We are live. We're doing our broadcast. Welcome to the Wolf's Den. It is just me today. I got nobody in the background, nobody backstage. I'm running the whole shebang-a-bang. So, welcome. And I'll do my best to monitor the comments as we go. And we're going to get into our lively Friday discussions. If you hear some background noise, I apologize. I got some people doing construction and a whole bunch of landscaping out here at the place that I'm currently living at, only for another 3 to 4 days, and then it's going to be a change of scenery for the summer for me. So we're going to have a bit of a different background coming up on the podcast soon. And yeah, I'm actually even beyond that planning a trip back to my hometown of Calgary in the next couple weeks here. So I'm really excited about that. I haven't been back in a little over a year now, and looking forward to making up for the last couple trips that I was out. Certainly weren't everything that they could have been, is the best way to put it. So yeah, looking forward to that trip and looking forward to today's discussion. We're going to get into it. We're going to, it's interesting. I had originally had the idea and the plan to start talking about archetypes and elements and how they play a role and relate and factor into our lives and personalities and all that stuff. Um, but something kind of showed up within me as I was getting ready for discussion on that topic today that changed my vibration and changed my frequency. And I said, oh, well, I guess that's what we're discussing. And we're going to continue on kind of what we've been talking about in the last few shows, which is personal frequency, vibration, and how that affects even how we show up for things, right? Where I had it in my mind, a preemptive idea, you could call it an expectation. It was certainly an intention towards having a different topic of discussion today. As the vibration showed up, it didn't seem natural. There wasn't a flow to it. It will come. We are going to talk about archetypes and elements and their relation to us. But it was feeling like if I was going to bring it up this week, it was going to be forced. And that doesn't allow me to show up as naturally and step into synchronicity with that frequency and that vibration that is showing up naturally, which is what we're talking about, frequency and vibration. So some of that we're going to get into story time. It's story time. We're going to get into some story time today. And we're going to talk a little bit about what I've been learning more about frequencies and energy flow. And so I guess a little bit of story time that we could get into on energy and frequency is, back when I was younger and I was looking into the early stages of all of this, what it all meant and how to do things like manifest and law of attraction and, monitoring our thoughts and doing all the shadow work, and all of it was just extension. And coming from where I am now and looking back on all these points that I used to anchor to as identity defining experiences, relationships and things that I had committed as really big portions of my life. And in essence, the alchemy from those experiences were absolutely pivotal in the development that led me to where I am now. I'm not taking away from that by any means. I'm simply more accountable for how my frequency draws in those experiences. And I wasn't back then. When I would go into my stages of growth and shadow work and reflection, it was all because something was happening to me, right? And the situation and the circumstances that I was faced with at the time were feeling like they were overwhelming, and um, it wasn't what I had actually intended for, and it was going against the law of attraction that I was trying to tune into, and yada yada yada. All of these reasons and justifications beyond simply just taking accountability for the honesty of the presence of my frequency, which meant letting down all the stories I was telling myself, basically. And again, talking into some of the past conversations we've had, these belief structures that had really set up the perspective of the experiences that I was having. So, it was a pattern, it was a cycle that I really had to understand. It was nobody else's fault, it was nobody else's doing. Universe wasn't even testing me or challenging me, it was simply giving me another opportunity. I was giving myself another opportunity to learn more about myself. And it's really that simple in essence. There's a lot of nuances and there's a lot of details to it, but that's what gets us confused. That's what gets us all wrapped up, because we try to make sense of everything that is supposed to happen, and the physical mind isn't meant to comprehend everything that's supposed to happen. It's only meant to comprehend what's happening in the moment right now. So again, bringing that presence back to accountability, the whole self in whatever situation, whatever given instance we are, just being present in the now. That's all we have. And that frequency is powerful. This is where we see people who have this very magnetic kind of flow and attraction about them. And it's not that they don't deal with things, it's not that they don't have, quote unquote, baggage or certain obstacles in life that they find challenging. It's simply that they've learned how to deal with those things as they arise. They don't carry all of these different elements that exist within the quantum and exist within our field of experience, all within the right now. It all exists simultaneously and instantaneously. That doesn't mean you have to carry it consciously all simultaneously and instantaneously. It's a thin border, it's a thin line. Living in the right now simply means dealing with the experience of right now, how creation is unfolding in front of us and is in tune and in reflection of the frequency that we are showing up with. It's a really it's a magnetic concept, is really the only way to put it when people tap into it, because there is so much freedom, there's admiration in it, there's liberation in it, there is a general cohesion with just the natural organic flow of the way things are showing up, knowing that it is the way it's supposed to be. And if it's going to change, then we create the change based off of our frequency. That's it. We don't demand anything external to happen. The external simply reflects the way that we are showing up and what we call for from the experience within our perspective. So this is a big growth that I had to take through a lot of periods of just anchoring back into an old belief system or an old belief structure that would cycle me through those types of older, lower frequency experiences. And it's interesting because I had a similar reminder of that just recently. It was about a week and a half, almost 2 weeks ago now. I went to go pay my phone bill online on my online banking, and I switched from Virgin Mobile to Bell Mobile in January 2023. And when I did that, I didn't remove Virgin from my online banking for the whole time, year and a half now or something it's been. And I always remembered, click the bell. It's not Virgin, you're not with Virgin anymore. And I don't know why I didn't remove it. I just didn't remove it. But for some reason, I can't remember what it was, but something, it was either an advertisement or an email or something just linked me to think about Virgin as I was going to pay my phone bill. And I accidentally clicked that account and I sent the money there. And as soon as I did it, this instant rush of like panic went like, oh my God, I just sent it to the wrong one. And I got to double pay the bill. And I got to call the bank and I got to call them. And it was this kind of a very spontaneous reaction and not a calm, present response. It was a spontaneous reaction because I was just judging myself for making a very, very simple mistake, right? And it was no reason for judgment. It was just something that, because I had never done it before, I'd always been very aware of it. I got real hard on myself, and I fell back into a pattern of that. And as soon as I did it, I called this and I called that and I got everything kind of lined up. And then I paid again. I did a double payment to Bell. So I did two payments in that same day, thinking that the bank was going to be able to catch the first transfer, bring it back, blah, blah, blah. Because I called them within like 5 minutes of it happening, 3 to 5 minutes max. So it easily should have been caught, but 48 hours goes by, 72 hours goes by, nothing showing up in the bank. And they said, when I talked to them, if it's not in there over this time, call the mobile provider directly, because we would have to put a trace and an investigation on it, blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, Jesus, okay. So it didn't show up. I called Virgin and I get them to check the account, everything like that, thinking, okay, cool, they'll resolve it internally. They'll send the money back. They go, we don't see anything coming through. The last payment that we saw was in February of 2023, which was me closing out the account. And I said, well, what the hell? Like, how did you guys not see it? The bank didn't catch it. It's not in my account. And I said, oh my God, do I gotta call Bell? Because Bell and Virgin are related. They're sister companies, right? And again, my panic response, or the really panic, quick, spontaneous reaction to it, didn't allow me to process any of this information that I already knew. I just reacted. I didn't respond. I didn't show up. So as it's all starting to click in, like a week later, I call Bell and I just don't even talk to anybody. I just do the online thing and it checks the account and it says, yeah, there's nothing owing, and there's a credit of 84 and some change. And I go, yeah, okay. So it was automatically, because they were sister companies and I knew that, it just transferred over to my active account, because the one with Virgin that I made the payment to was no longer active. It was inactive. So basically what this story time was about was, if I had just calmly taken that presence to simply be in my own state and respond, not judgmental, not have this spontaneous, oh, I need to fix this, this kind of wounded masculine response, instead of just calmly showing up, I wouldn't have had to make a double payment. But I mean, I got the credit on the account, whatever it's going to cover next month. It all ended up working out regardless, because thankfully the frequency state that I'm waking up to and I'm constantly tuning into all day long calls for that level of care and mindfulness, even if I'm not fully aware of the process. I'm being looked after, and I understand that, because that's what my frequency is dictating from the experiences. Now, the details of it, how it unfolds, that's why we're here. We get to step by step be a part of the unfolding of creation, of the expression of creation. So being a part of the details as they go, kind of, randomly, that's the fun. That's the excitement of being here, and knowing that your frequency is going to have a container of the context of those experiences. There's this freedom of, no need to fear, no need to have anxiety, no need to have doubt. Everything just shows up completely in alignment and in tune with that frequency. and how you're dictating that frequency. So I had a slip up, but it was the big thing that we get out of tuning into this as an overall mentality and perspective shift. It's not that certain things just stop happening, because again, it's a shared universe and we're not perfect. We're going to have slip ups like that. But what we get to do when we step fully into this mentality and we realize this mentality, we then get to use things that are of non-preference in a way that we prefer them. It's so interesting. So all the experiences that aren't in alignment of our preferred frequency are showing up as a reminder of our preference of frequency. So I'm calling it the reference of preference, right? The references of preferences. It's simply these experiences that we get to calibrate our own preference over and over. So it allows us to not invalidate the level of experiences that we're going through. There's no, we basically take the wind out of the sails of suffering at that point, because then there is no suffering. We understand it's showing up to reinforce our level of preference, our awareness, our higher calibration, all of the positive things that we want. So we get to utilize that, alchemize it, and transmute it as the energy that it is into an experience of preferred reality. It's an incredible state to be able to realize and shift into. Another level of frequency is when we talk about stuff like certain awakenings that we go through, right? These are frequency shifts on a cellular level, on the those are like the realization ones, right? And those awakenings, those epiphanies, those transformative shifts, not just where we feel something else different, or we are at a gathering and we're in that collective energy of the gathering and we feel that power and we know that we're connected to the higher source. Those are all awesome frames of experience and reference. But what I'm talking about with the awakenings and the transformations is that inside out restructuring of your cellular format. It's a very different level of frequency shift. And with those ones, this is where we talk about certain things like Kundalini awakening, and where people actually open their third eye. Is it a physical thing? I haven't seen it be a physical thing. I don't want to discount it be, an actual physical thing. I'm sure that could happen. But I know on energetic and an ethereal and a astral level within our own auric field, it's a legitimate opening of the pineal gland, and that has a representation in our aura that would show up looking like a third eye, very much so. So all of those types of levels of transformation are big frequency shifts, and the reason that we can put them into a perspective of it being frequency shifts is you see the entirety of how the experience shows up changes along with that transformation. It's not just you, it's not just a personal thing. It literally affects the reality that you're living in. Some of the other stuff that we were referencing, going to the gatherings, feeling the collective energy, those are very much so personal transformations or personal adherences to those energy and those frequency shifts. When it's that realization, you are literally attuning yourself on a cellular level to the frequency of the dimension of reality that you are experiencing. And that's why everything changes after that. The way that the world looks, the way that you interact with the world, the way that the world interacts with you. I was learning more, and I've been studying more about Kundalini awakening because I've been going through what I've come to be aware is a Kundalini rising within myself. And this has been taking place since about end of December, mid-December to mid-January. naturally somewhere within that time frame. I had the acknowledgement that it was starting. And it came very much so in alignment with a lot of other transformative processes, personal transformative processes that I was going through. Before we get too deep into the Kundalini one, it's story time. It's story time. A big awakening that took place for me before I had moved out to BC. So I was living in Calgary. It was 2019. I had just a few months prior. Was it 2019 or 2020? I believe it was 2019. It was either late 2019, summer of 2019, or early 2020. I'm thinking it was summer 2019. I had just finished up putting up to the sky months earlier and preparing myself to leave a 15-year-long career that I was completely miserable in. I was just on the heels of the ending of my twin flame union, and it was that relationship started in high school, stretched out because twin flames do the running. We came back together, I don't know, 12 years later, something along those lines. And um, it was certainly an eruption. It was very fiery and fizzled out, and we, did the running aspect again. So I was on the heels of that, and my God, was I recovering from that. That encounter burned so much away from me, which is what the stages of twin flame relationship and union are about: burning away all the pieces of self that aren't relevant, that aren't a part of the authentic shining of that source light that is being cast as your physical form, as your experience. So the twin flame is about that revealing, right? And we revealed. And as I was coming to grips and terms and recovering from all of that, I had met someone who helped me with a process of reclaiming my soul, because during that process, there was some actions that were exchanged that actually dislocated my soul from my body. And I was living very, very zombie-esque as a result of that for not too long of a time period, but long enough to certainly have had an effect on me. So as I met this person, very, very powerful individual who was helping me replace and reclaim my soul back into its proper spot. Just beforehand, in my energy, he had recognized that I had gone through an awakening, which I had. Just prior to meeting him, and again on the heels of all of that personal stuff, the personal weight of things, I had this encounter where I went into a meditative state, really, really powerful meditative state. And I was sitting there and I was met by Raphael, Gabriel, and Michael. And they all came down, the three archangels. And the way that they formed was like a pyramid in front of me, but I would have been the fourth piece to create a diamond formation. So it's like I was a part of the union. And it was a quadrant aspect, a four directional thing, tapping into my personal elemental presence. A lot of different alchemy was taking place. And what ended up happening in that encounter was, out of my back energetically, I grew and I awakened these angel wings, these archangel wings. And the three archangels came down to help attune me to that frequency, to induct me basically to those energies, those frequencies. And it was a very, very powerful transformative shift that I still utilize to this day in a number of different instances. But it was one of the first ones that I noticed was a reality shifting awakening, right? I had epiphanies. I had certain personal shifts and adherences to frequencies and energies, but nothing quite on this level that had completely well, I shouldn't say that. Getting my Reiki master's attunements a little while before this took place was definitely on the same par as this. But because that was getting attuned into those master frequencies is basically like just graduating high school and saying, cool, you're ready to head out into the real world. This was some of my first real world experience with that. And it was powerful. Like I said, I still utilize it to this day. So on that level of reference is where I can look at certain other things that I feel are showing up in my world, like this recent Kundalini awakening, and I can have some context of the transformative power and application that it's going to have in my universe. So it's lately with the Kundalini awakening. Like I said, about mid-December to mid-January when it started. I can't remember exactly what state I was in. I don't think I was doing meditation or anything prior. I don't remember if I was downloading a bunch of information, but obviously I was in some sort of synchronized state to be able to receive that information. Prior to becoming aware of that energy shift, I had just stepped into a full reclamation and expansion of self. So the year prior to that, I had gone through a very, very deep relationship that was incredibly, it was very powerful on all levels, is the only way I can put it. It started very powerfully and it ended very powerfully. And it was quick. It was about 7 months, and it was so powerful that within that 7 months, at the beginning, not only did it seem like it had always been there, but by the time it had really gotten to any level of just starting to even get to know each other properly, there was so much level of commitment and comfort that I couldn't see the future without that. And I'm sure it could be equated even to a certain level of codependency, if I'm being perfectly vulnerable and honest about it, because it developed into that. But at the beginning, I was adamant that that wasn't how it was starting, because I had taken a lot of time to step into a whole new state of masculinity and accountability in my world, shaking off certain things like the past twin flame relationship, past soulmate encounters that were filled with a lack of accountability on my end. So I had really and truly shifted into something different when that relationship started. The thing that ended up happening was the circumstances that I called for out of that relationship put me into the position of challenging myself, basically, and those new states of frequency, all of that new posture that I was showing up with as the relationship started. I was immediately given opportunities to see how well I could sustain that. And I got to be honest, I didn't. I just didn't. There was a big, big level of adherence and I mean, I guess if I'm being honest, cowardice, like just a true level of cowardice with myself, with her, with how I was showing up for the relationship. I started to very much respond out of fear. And it was not allowing me to be the same person in the middle and towards the end of the relationship as who I was at the beginning of the relationship. So this was a big, shift in my world, a whole bunch of personal frequency and vulnerability and accountability, contexts and opportunities that I was giving myself. So believe me, with all of the gory details, with how powerfully things ended, I could have turned it into a woe is me situation. And it almost did a couple times. It almost did very early on at the early stages of it ending. But I caught myself doing that. And I very much so knew that there's no value that comes from that. There's no transformative process, and on top of that, I'm not honoring a person who I once stood in front of myself, her, and the whole world and said I wanted to make new life with her. I wanted to spend my life with her, and I wanted to share everything I was with this person, and I loved this person. So I can't stand by her or have stood by her and have said that and meant it and then turn it around because I'm hurt by circumstances of the situation and respond out of spite. I knew that's there's so many levels and contexts of how that frequency applies to only further the wounds of that frequency and that experience. And I just wasn't going to be a part of it. So I took accountability for any of the actions that I needed to towards the end of it, the times that I did slip up, and I absolutely let my pain get the better of me, and understood how that was being reflected and how it was not allowing me to even see her as the person that she was. So coming out of all of that, again, one of the biggest commitments, one of the biggest things I had ever shown up for in my entire life. And it just ended and like powerfully ended. I needed to recover. So I, thankfully had manifested some things with tribe, co manifested things with some tribe members and soulmates. And luckily, I had space over the next few months of that to work on my state of frequency. Because of where it was at that point, it was so broken and so empty. So a very vacant frequency is, oh, that's such a well put term for it. It was a vacant frequency. I needed to find the space to reclaim myself. So I went through, I don't know, a good 3 months of just being with those thoughts, being with the pain, being with all of the things that I could have chosen to carry, but instead I was choosing to face head on so I didn't have to carry them moving forward. Didn't mean that, they didn't exist. I wasn't invalidating the experiences. I was simply learning about the process of transmuting them to something else, utilizing the fact that it's simply just energy and using it as a reference to enhance my preference. So as I was doing that, and I went through, the 3 months of it, there was other things that were taking place, details of the experience that were certainly in alignment with that vacant frequency. And when I noticed the reflection of that showing up in my world, I quickly took accountability for it. I had conversations with people that I needed to have conversations with. I made amends in certain areas where I wasn't showing up. And I quickly took that accountability and put the energy back towards showing up, because I had faced everything that I was spending the energy on carrying, and I wasn't spending that energy on carrying it anymore. So I was able to be present again, start showing up. Once that happened, I was able to get back out on my own. And when I did that, I faced a lot of things that while I was away and healing, I was removed. So I got to come back into the regular shared frequency of everything, where it's not just other people that I have to deal with, but certain experiences that I had shared with her in the past, and the remnants of those frequencies in this shared plane of existence. I had to face all of that and start coming to terms with that within my new state of accountability. Early on, it was hard. There was a lot of moments I was just driving down familiar roads crying and facing the thoughts and the memories, and coming to acknowledgement and terms with how to catalyze and transmute what was surfacing. And I did that by, if I was feeling that lack of love, reach out to people and express love. And it immediately just motivated me to realize and embody love in my world. So I was going through very big transformative processes from it. And when I was back out on my own after I had faced all of that, shared experience, frequency, range of things, um, I had I had hit this point of acknowledgement with self, where I I ended up just coming to terms one day and sitting there going, you know, I've been here before. This is where I was before the relationship, but there was a different presence with it, because I had realized it through how I had responded through all of those prior experiences leading up to this new realization. That response catalyzed an embodiment of where I was, all of that work that I had put in to the state of where I was before the relationship, right? All that masculinity, all that accountability. Because back then, I still had to put all this conscious effort and extending a frequency into monitoring the actions, making sure that this is in alignment with this, and I have to do this to have this result. And it was a lot of extension of self and a lot of energy put into that process. When I came to this realization and this new state of reclamation, going, I've been here before, the embodiment of it, because it had just reached an autonomy of, those are now my natural responses, those are my autopilot responses, I don't have to consciously put energy into it anymore. All of that conscious energy, I had something new to do with. I had all this blank space and awareness and presence to go, oh shit, what do I do with this now? So I started putting it into learning about manifesting and utilizing that energy, because everything else was running on autopilot. So I said, cool. Doesn't mean that it's not going to have slip ups. Autopilot's not perfect, but it allowed me to let it run autonomously. And then when there was a hiccup, because it was so auto programmed, my awareness would just pick up on the hiccup immediately. Pick up on the hiccup. I like that. Pick up on the hiccup. It would pick up on the hiccup and immediately, fix it. Have a drink of water, and it would fix it. So that new energy into manifestation and catalyzation, it showed me that I could show up for things that I hadn't showed up for very, very differently. This meant relationships, this meant projections of the future, intentions, all of these different things that, again, I was spending all of my energy on the process of things and my step by step. That's what I transfer all that energy over. I'm running on a different engine now. So this is where I started to really get the early stages and the early seeds planted of how my frequency affects my reality, because I wouldn't have reached that level of autonomy without spending all of that time going through over and over again, formatting myself, putting in all of that conscious energy, learning about what it actually meant to tap into that frequency, make the choices of tapping into that frequency, the conscious awareness of it, of the right now. So, doing those early foundational steps and the grunt work of getting those basics mastered allowed the autonomy to kick in, and it's put me into a very different position of levels of awareness, levels of catalyzation. So as I started to manifest different, like really quickly, new opportunities and abundance in my world, and clearing things up, like I called back my power from a lot of places that I had just extended it to, and open space where it just wasn't being reciprocated, and simply brought all of that energy back into me so I could start utilizing it in a whole new way. When all of that was taking place, that's when eventually a few dominoes fell, and I started to feel this tingly going on in my body. I said, "Ooh, I'm getting tingly," and stuff was happening a lot more. I was more aware of things more so than I had been prior. And then again, about somewhere between December and January, I had this state. I just dropped into a state. Again, I don't remember if I was downloading stuff. I don't remember if I was. I don't believe I was meditating, but I just hit a state of awareness, and I felt it at the base of my spine, and it was doing a figure eight. And I just said, "Oh, that's the Kundalini. That's the Kundalini." And I just felt it, and it was just going. It was just slithering back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And eventually, what starts to happen is that figure eight starts going up, right? And that's the slithering up your spine until it reaches the base of the spine, and boom, Kundalini awakening. Some of the teachings that I had received within the dominoes that had fallen prior to feeling the infinity beginning of that energy was learning about full circle frequency and full circle energy. Now, I'm not talking about repeating a cycle. I'm talking about full circle energy, because when we do full circle, we actually start something new. When we are repeating a cycle, we're simply going over and over and over and over and over again. But when we do a full circle, we start on a new path. And when we come full circle on that secondary new path, we've hit an infinity marker. And when we stop circling and we're not, repeating any cycles on that new path, and we meet in the middle, it's the center of infinity energy. This is the prime vortex of creation and manifestation. So I started to learn about all of that full circle energy and the union aspect of, even when we're still doing a circle on our own, if we've done one completion of a portion of the journey, and we're simply doing a repetition reformatting thing, we can actually come into union with someone else who has already done a full circle energy, and they create the stability of where we're circling. They'll step in, and now we've reached an infinity union with another full circle person who has done their own journey come full circle. And this is where we talk about the unity of tribe, and how manifestation with tribe really, really just accelerates things when we're in that proper frequency with each other. So, and again, this only works if both people showing up for the union have at least completed one full circle. And if they're both working on the other half, that's fine. That's okay. But you can't be on your first still repetitive cycle and try to show up, because it's just going to fall into the repetitive cycle of the other person. There's no stability. There's no union that shows up. So through all of that understanding of full circle energy and frequency and presence, I started to be able to feel that within myself as the Kundalini energy showed up at the base of my spine. Over the months, I've been practicing and downloading more frequency on it, learning more about it. There's so many different flavors of teaching when it comes to Kundalini, and it's to be completely expected, to be honest with you, when it comes to something like Kundalini, because I believe, yes, there is a very source experience of Kundalini awakening, but the rest of it, the contextualized experience of Kundalini awakening is so individually relative, but I do believe that there is a source experience that is just translatable and relatable to all Kundalini awakening. And that's where I feel that serpent energy, right? I feel like that's part of the process, and it has to rise up the spine. So a lot of the teachings that I've been getting into it, learning about, again, personal tone, personal frequency, when we're doing chants and trying to find our personal frequency and that harmony of resonance, of vibration within our body, and we're going through certain sounds, certain mantras, certain whatever, um there's a state that we tap into that allows us to, what, I'm trailing off, my thoughts are going here because I hit too high, I went too high up, and I'm trying to remember, get back to where I was. um the frequency that we're showing up at with this full circle energy and this perfection of creation, kundalini, that's where we were, sorry, thank you. um this translatable kundalini energy, as it's rising and as it comes up, the frequency that we step into individually is going to be very uniquely transformative. But I feel like that surge of energy, that slithering of energy, is a universal translation. And for me personally, some of the things that I've been learning about when it comes to my own rising, masculine in particular, there are certain things like finding out about semen retention practices and channeling the creative energy and the sexual energy, learning about the driving force behind masculinity, because that's really all I can speak to experientially. I can't speak to the feminine kundalini rising. I'm sure I can learn about it, and there are maybe opinions I could throw out based off of teachings I could learn on it, but I could never speak experientially on what feminine kundalini rising, the details of that would be. I can only really speak on the masculine process of that. So within the semen retention on that, the practicing on that is learning to channel the rising, that flow of energy, because part of that energetic metaphor that's taking place is one of the reasons that the infinity is swirling at the base of the spine, is because, and I know I've talked about it on past shows before, there's an oil secretion that comes from the medulla oblongata. And when a masculine state reaches a certain frequency and it secretes that oil, it transfers down all the way to the base of the spine, where it pools and it culminates. And that's where the infinity vortex channels that energy into that oil. So then we have the metaphorical and the etherical bridging into physical actuality of what's taking place in the body, the actual, um I guess, crystallization is the best way to put it, of the energy experience. And as that pool of oil is receiving all of that energy, masculine urges come up. And unfortunately, in today's society, the way that a traditional man in the average age range of having an awakening and having an experience like that be triggered, the way that average range is conditioned is to callously throw away that sexual and creative energy. And whether it be through excessive porn and masturbation, or the casual sex culture that's just rampant, and removing all of that creative magic and love making that comes with truly engaging in sacred sexual practice, all of that expends the energy from that oil, and then eventually it just kind of dissipates. So the energy is then used to ejaculate and spent on all of that other physical action, and the oil itself again just dissipates. Nothing happens with the awakening process. Man goes on about his day completely unaware that he just missed out on a massive transformation within himself. With the right practice, the right awareness of this, and the right discipline, a man can channel that energy back up. And we can do certain things like Kegels, where it's a flexing of the muscle between where the testicles and the anus are. So it's the scrotum basically, but it's a very specific muscle because there's a muscle to flex the actual groin and the private area, and there's a muscle to flex the anus, and then there's a muscle right in between, very, very tiny little guy. And it takes a lot of conscious focus, but you can do that. You can talk to yourself in your brain and actually trigger certain responses from any muscle group. Doesn't have to just be this for the Kundalini practice. This can be for any muscle group, but it takes focus to get that little tiny one, because most of us aren't even aware that it's there. So when we start getting those urges, and they're really powerful at times, and we know that there's a surge, if I know I feel that energy doing the vortex pooling up, I will intentionally put focus into channeling, doing some Kegels and channeling that energy, because when the oil reaches the pool at the base of the spine and it creates its own basin, and all of the energy starts getting put right into that oil, the Kegels and the channeling, proper breath, proper focus will push the oil slowly up the spine. And that's where the slithering effect comes in, is where we feel it slowly come back up. Eventually, when we are able to push the oil to a high enough point and it hits the top of the spine, base of the neck, base of the skull, the oil reaches into the brain and it creates a complete explosion of all of that Kundalini energy, activating all these new synapses in the brain and stimuli, and just completely reprogramming us as individuals. Very, very powerful process, and I'm excited that I'm aware that it's taking place. Again, there's so many different variable context to the teachings of it. These are the ones that are resonant with me currently, with where I'm at and where I feel the transformation is taking me. Kundalini in and of itself is also not just restricted to, I guess, sexual or sacral energy. It's a huge activator for it, because sacral energy is the creative force. It is the force of life. So it brings that force into the existence of life for us in our reality, sacral activated. But Kundalini, because of that, because it's channeled through creative force, that's its true essence, is just the force of life. It's not just categorized as simply sexual, because sexual is just a concept of creative energy. It's a facet of creative energy. And when we talk about the force of life, this is what we talk about with Kundalini. This is a very I don't want to say old, but it's a very common understanding for older practitioners and grandmasters. And I am nowhere near that level when it comes to Kundalini. Again, I'm just going through my own awakening with it, but through a lot of the studies and a lot of the teachings I've received, when it comes from a lot of these people who have gone through the ringer, been around the block a few damn times. This comes to be the highest premise of understanding of Kundalini, is that it is just life force, pure life energy. So being able to tap into the realization of that frequency allows the experience of life to adhere to that perspective of pure creative force, just life. And to be able to see that reflection in everything that we're going through, again, it removes the wind out of the sails of suffering, out of anxiety, out of fear, out of doubt. It allows us to show up simply for the process of being here, for the experience of creation, of life, knowing that we can tune into the frequency of the multiverse to literally adjust the perspective of the experience of reality, and use anything within that shared plane that is not of preference to enhance and enforce our state of preference. It is all meant for and through us. It's an incredible transformation and perspective shift. I want to thank everybody for showing up today. This was absolutely a great talk. And like I said, I knew that this was the natural state. This was the vibration that I was feeling to show up in, with the frequency of eventually we're going to start talking about archetypes and elements. And interestingly enough, knowing me, I have managed to articulate those teachings into a relation and translation of how it relates to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, of course, because knowing me, there's nothing I do that I can't relate to either Power Rangers or Ninja Turtles. There's a lot to come, folks, trust me. So if we have any questions, I'll open the floor up. Please make some comments, and we'll see if we can get to any questions before the end here. Other than that, we're getting pretty close to wrapping it up for the week. Next Friday, I will more than likely be at my new location, my new space for the next few months. And after that, I will potentially be in Calgary for the following week. We'll see. I don't know. We'll stay posted and find out together. Other than that, I'm not really seeing any questions show up right now. So I think we're going to end it for the week. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. Always a pleasure. We'll see you next time.